why I'm recording a video when I'm sitting right next to you in the classroom. Well, mostly it's because I'm sick and I know that my voice is not going to hold out the whole day. So I figured I would go ahead and record. That way I can get what I need to say and then plus say some stuff in class and my voice.
Chapter 1 of The Great Gatsby, we find 29-year-old Nick Carraway reflecting on his recent experiences of his life. He's graduated from Yale and has served in the Army. He then decides to leave the Midwest and move to New York. He takes up residency in West Egg, a Long Island community. He rents a home next to Jay Gatsby, who's a wealthy and mysterious businessman. Now, just across the bay lives Nick's cousin, socialite Daisy Buchanan, with her brutish husband, Tom Buchanan. Now, after arriving, Nick is invited to dinner at the Buchanan's home. He meets Daisy's friend, professional golfer Jordan Baker. Now, during the dinner, the four discuss superficial matters. Now, Tom, he gets up, he leaves to take a phone call. Now, while he's gone, Jordan reveals he must be talking to his mistress, a woman in New York he makes no attempt to hide.
Tom ducks out to take the call. Daisy follows him outside, and after a moment, Nick and Jordan can hear the couple having a muffled shouting match on the other side of the door. So what's going on? Okay, keep up. Jordan informs Nick that Tom, the dumpster fire, has a lady friend in New York. This is not a friend who happens to be a lady. This is a lady friend. What's worse, Daisy knows about it. Yikes. Tom and Daisy come back into the room and it's super awkward, but Daisy keeps smiling and laughing like there's nothing wrong. And she keeps this act up as the phone rings again and again. I couldn't guess what Tom and Daisy were thinking, but I doubt even Miss Baker was able to put this fifth guest's shrill metallic urgency out of mind. I'll say it again. Yikes. After dinner, Nick and Daisy go off together, and she tells the story about the birth of her daughter. She says she, her daughter, was less than an hour old, and Tom was God knows where, though, I think we can guess. After she finds out it's a girl and cries about that fact for a while, she says, "All right, I'm glad it's a girl, and I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in this world, a beautiful little fool." So, feminism. So 30-year-old Nick Carraway opens the book by saying that whenever he encounters behavior others might criticize, his daddy taught him to consider the advantages you've had. He goes on saying, in consequence, I'm inclined to reserve all judgments. As a narrative device, this is a good move because over the next 198 pages, our boy Nick here is going to be hanging out with some really terrible people, or at least people making terrible choices, Gatsby the Great included. If Fitzgerald didn't have us looking through the empathetic, non-judgy eyes of Nick here, I think I would legit hate every last person in this book. Nick helps soften him up. So what might not be clear here is that Nick is writing at the end of a timeline that we're about to cover. All the stuff that happens later in the text, this Nick has already lived through. And whatever he lived through, it has him pretty shaken up. It's like his whole life is spinning. He says that now he just wants the world to be in uniform and at a sort of moral attention forever. So whatever it was bad. The only thing he seems sure of is a man named Gatsby, a guy who he says had an extraordinary gift for hope. He continues, no, Gatsby turned out all right in the end. But Nick continues, it's what preyed on Gatsby. What foul dust floated in the wake of his dreams that temporarily closed out my interests in the abortive sorrows and short-winded elations of men. With that beautiful and slightly ominous line as our backdrop, Nick jumps back to the beginning of his narrative, and now we're off and running. So it seems Nick originally came to New York to sell bonds. He's new to this, but it's the 1920s, so why not? Over the next few pages, we learn about East and West Egg, two neighborhoods about 20 miles outside of New York. East Egg is old money. It's snooty, stuck-up, decadent, and lame, while West Egg is new rich. It's also decadent, but way more awesome. They face each other across a bay.
New money people are people that are newly rich. Most likely these are people that pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and they made their own money. You might call new money people that have won the lottery like today. There's also a term called nouveau riche, as some people say. They're people that live in West Egg. Now, East Egg are your old money people. These are people that inherited money from their family and they've had money for years. And you might be saying, hey, what's the difference? Well, normal people, we would say that. What's the difference? Who cares? These people do. The old money people, they see themselves as hoity-toity or of a higher society because they have this money that has been inherited, passed down, and they consider themselves to be better than everybody else. So the fact that Tom and Daisy live in old money. East Egg lets us know that they are in fact old money, that they've, inherited, it's been passed down. And West Egg, new money, that would be Gatsby. He's obviously new money. Now, we don't know where he got his money. We don't know anything about him really, other than this green light thing at the end of his dock. Now Nick, because Nick is old money. His dad even said, don't forget, as you're going through life, some people, not everyone has had the advantages that you have had. Why is he in West Egg? Why is he in new money? Well, that's just kind of symbolic of what he wants to be. If you look, Tom and Daisy are in huge mansions, a huge mansion because that matches them, because they've had money for years. And then we've got Jay Gatsby, who's in a mansion because he's had money for a short time, but he still has money. But Nick is in this little sort of cottage bungalow thing. That's because even though Nick is old money, he wants to make his own money. He wants to live on his own. He doesn't just want to inherit the fortune and live like that. He wants to make his own fortune, and make his own path in his own life. And that's why he's in the new money section, because he wants to be, essentially he wants to be new money, even though that's considered socially, below his station. He still wants to do that for himself.
Nick here heads to the mansion of Tom and Daisy Buchanan on East Egg. Daisy is Nick's cousin. She's flirty, coy, fun, and engaging, while Tom, by all accounts, is a world-class dumpster fire. This guy sucks. Nick describes him as a man who reached such an acute, limited excellence at 21 that everything after savored of anticlimax. Listen, if your life has peaked at 21, you need to get yourself some new goals. On page 10, Nick describes Tom as a powerful former football player. He talks about his glistening boots, his great pack of muscles, the effeminate swank of his riding clothes, and his cruel, cruel body. If you find this description to be vaguely sexual, so do I. The only other character is Daisy's friend, the androgynously named Jordan Baker, a famous golfer. When Jordan learns that Nick here just moved to New Money West Egg, she asks if he knows Gatsby. Daisy perks up at the name, but before Nick could reply that Gatsby's his neighbor, dinner is announced. Them, Tom sets off on this rant about how the Nordic race, them, created everything worth having and thus need to keep the inferior races down. All the while, no one at this dinner has ever actually made anything, and I regret not putting air quotes around inferior races.
If you remember from our opening video, we talked a lot about racism at the time. So there was a group of African American people that were really flourishing two generations out from slavery, about the Tulsa Race Massacre, and how we had sort of a Black Wall Street. The economy was doing well for everyone, including these type of people. And even though they were mostly sort of isolated in their own communities, they were thriving. The Great Migration saw a lot of people moving in and out of cities, but we also see a lot of Southern people moving up north. And Black people were moving from the South up north, and that's how we got the Harlem Renaissance. Now, this book takes place in New York as well, and we can see that Tom is quite racist. He references a book, which, by the way, is a completely fictional book, talking about the colored empires. He believes in strong breeding, like white people should stay with white people, Black people should stay with Black people. And his fear matches the sort of second wave of the KKK, which we also talked about. He's like a second wave KKK member, because his fear matches what they think, which they think that all these Black people coming from the South moving north, they're going to take over the country and they're going to take all the good jobs and completely uproot the system. And Tom doesn't like that. And Daisy just goes with whatever her husband says, and that is part of the gender issues of the time. Women were still second-class citizens, even though we've got the flapper woman who is, flourishing and finding independence. These other type of women that were brought up to be traditional, a time before the 19th Amendment, they are going to do whatever their husband sort of tells them to do.
The chapter closes with Nick getting home and sitting outside for a while. Suddenly, he sees his neighbor come out of his ridiculous mansion. After a moment, the neighbor, who Nick rightly assumes is Gatsby, reaches his hand out across the water, trembling slightly. Nick looks across the bay to see what he's trying to use the force on, but he doesn't see anything except for a single green light at the end of a dock across the bay.
In this chapter, Nick is revealed to be an honest narrator. Reflections on his father's advice suggest Nick is non-judgmental and moral. This is the perfect lens to view a story of deception, superficiality, and immorality. Because of his background, it's clear he will fit into both social circles, old money of East Egg and new money of West Egg. Now, old money residents like Tom Buchanan, they're arrogant. New money residents like Jay Gatsby are vulnerable. Nick is the perfect balanced narrator to navigate both groups without bias. Now, the author, Fitzgerald, uses detailed descriptions to highlight the luxury in which the characters live. We're talking grand mansions, butlers and silver polishers, horse stables. Women described as balloons merely float through life. Daisy and Jordan are foolish and flighty. Tom is insensitive and expects to have his way. This leaves Nick slightly confused, disgusted with their lifestyle. Now, the green light Gatsby is reaching toward the end of the chapter is deeply symbolic.
The last question asks about Nick's engagement. Nick tells us very clear, okay, the reader, that he was not engaged. He was kind of dating somebody. He was spending extra time with a young woman. Daisy, sort of, in his face says, "Oh, no, I heard it in the grapevine. I heard from 3 different people that you were engaged and all this." And he says no, but that's actually part of the reason why he came to the East Coast, was to get away from those rumors and things like that, which further leads to this kind of motif of rumor and hearsay, the power of rumor and hearsay. So even though Nick was not engaged to this woman, he never proposed to this woman, it almost seems like he was. And Daisy insisting that, "Oh, yes, you were," just goes to tell us that sometimes, even if somebody tells you, no, that's not correct, another person might actually believe the rumor over believing you straight from the horse's mouth. And we will see throughout the text the power of rumor and hearsay. That will be a common motif.